Hey, I'm Mark, and congrats on your new camera. I bet you can't wait to start using it. Getting to know a new camera is always exciting and sometimes challenging. And with so many new, amazing features and functions, you might not know where to start. Well, I'm here to help. In this video, we'll unbox the camera together, identify some of the physical controls and dials, and make sense of the more important features available to you through the menus. And whether you've just purchased your first camera or you're an expert with many years of experience, in this video, we'll give you plenty of good information to get you started. Remember, the more you know about your camera, the better you'll be at capturing great images. Over the course of this video, I'll help you set up your camera and get comfortable with its features. Now, there's a lot to learn, so let's open the box and get started. Okay, first things first, before we look inside, you may have purchased the Z6 II or a Z7 II, but for the most part, you're getting the same experience. Same parts, even the same camera body. The only major difference between the two cameras are resolution, burst speed, and low light shooting specs. Other than that, they both function and look the same. I have a Z6 II here, but again, everything I'm showing you applies to both cameras. I also have the 24 to 70mm kit, and you might not. You might have opted for the body only. That's no problem, because most of what I'll be talking about with the 24 to 70 will apply to other Nikon lenses as well. Okay, so let's unbox this. Okay, so you have your basic warranty and manual information here. And by the way, if you like having a manual on you at all times, go to our website and make sure you download the manual right to your phone. Here is the camera body. That's the first thing. And there's the Z6 II. And then you have your lens. And this is the 24 to 70. If you look inside the box, you'll also find this piece right here, which is a lens hood. We also have a strap and a USB cable. Use the USB cable when you want to transfer images directly from the camera to your computer without taking your memory card out of the camera. Now we also have some cable clips here. And these are really used for the USB and HDMI cables, just to make sure that they're nice and snug inside the port on the side of the camera so they don't pop out when you're moving the camera around. And of course, we have the battery and charger. And we have one more little piece here for the charger. And that's this plug right here. So what you do is you just pop that on there. There's a little slider right here. You put that down, you can stick it right into the wall. It's going to take you about 2 hours and 45 minutes to fully charge this ENEL15C battery. Alright, now out of the box your battery won't be fully charged, but you'll get some juice out of it. My battery is ready to go, so I'm just going to go ahead and pop it right into the camera. This is the battery door right here at the bottom of the camera. I'm just going to slide the latch with my fingernail down to open the door, take my battery with the contacts going inside. Now, I'm just going to attach the lens now and make sure we're ready to go. I'm just looking for a white dot here on the lens, and I'm going to line it up with the white dot on the camera. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take off the rear cap of the lens, put it off to the side. Last thing I do is I take off the body cap because I want to minimize the time it's exposed to the elements. So I'm going to line up that 2 dots right there, and once it's in place, it should be snug. You'll hear it click. And it's snug, and you're ready to go. Alright, next thing is the memory card. Get yourself a quality CF Express XQD or SD card with at least 250 megabyte per second transfer rate, and that'll support movie recording up to 4K 60p, which both of these cameras can do. Now with 2 card slots, you can use the second slot as a backup or additional storage to put RAW files on one card and JPEGs on the other. Alright, now let's start off by looking at the parts of the camera, starting with the top. Now over here on the left hand side is the mode dial. And to change the exposure mode of the camera, you gotta hold the center button right down here, rotate the dial to your desired exposure mode. I'm just gonna leave it on auto right for now. It locks in place once you release that button so it won't move. On the left side of what we call the electronic viewfinder, this is a high resolution screen that you can look through right there, is this display button. And you can use that button to toggle through your displays for either the EVF or the screen. So by default, the camera automatically switches between the EVF and the LCD screen. Now speaking of the screen, you can tilt the screen 90 degrees like so. So if you're using the screen to compose your images or videos, or 45 degrees straight down. Now keep in mind, if you're in movie mode and you tilt the screen, the camera knows not to activate the EVF when the screen is tilted. So you can still use the EVF to shoot video, you just need to make sure that the screen is all the way in. On the right side of the camera, we have what I'll refer to as the control panel, which shows you all your main settings at a glance. And next to that, you have the on-off switch right here, your shutter release, which you'll use to take still photos. We have a dedicated movie record button. This is what you'll use to start and stop your movie recording. An ISO button, exposure compensation, and we're going to move over on the left-hand side of the camera here, and I'll show you the connectors. First of all, we'll start with this door for video. You'll see you have your microphone and headphone ports. Be extra careful not to mix them up because you won't get any sound if you accidentally plug in your microphone in the top port. On the right hand side, this door here will reveal what we call an accessory terminal to attach things like remote triggers. We have an HDMI mini port as well as a USB-C port up top to transfer images to your computer or even charge the camera battery through the USB. Now at the back of the camera here, I'm going to just tour you around, and you have your playback, delete buttons up here. On the right hand side we have a switch here, and that is to change between stills and movie mode. So make sure it's on the proper one because your interface sort of changes and it'll affect whether you can take pictures or not. Now we have this display button right here in the center, and that will toggle through various displays depending on which mode you're on. To the right of that we have the AF on button. This is the great thing about shooting with these type of cameras is you can actually activate your autofocus with that button. We have a joystick here which I'll refer to as the sub-selector. This very handy button here, this is the I button. It's a customized menu that you'll see either on your movie or stills mode. And we have a pad here that we'll call the multi-selector, as well as this cluster of buttons here at the bottom. That's your zoom in, zoom out switch for your photos, the menu button, and this button right here, which is your release mode button where you can set your frame rates as well as self-timer. Alright, now that we've explored the outside of the camera, let's turn it on and explore the menus and settings. So first thing I'm going to do is turn the camera on with this switch right here. And you may see this notice overlaid on the screen, and that's because I'm using the 24-70, which is the lens that contracts to take up less space for travel purposes. But when you want to shoot with it, you need to make sure you rotate the lens until you hear a click. And that'll put you in the 24 to 70 millimeter working zoom range. And now that that's done, that message disappears and you're ready to go. Now the first thing I recommend that you do is to set the date and time. And to do that, I'm going to hit the menu button. I'm going to go to the setup menu and find time zone and date. Trust me, you want to do this now. Otherwise, your files may have the incorrect date and time, and it's a real pain to organize your files later on if they're not precise. Now, the next thing you're going to do, while you're using your camera, you can compose your shots either through the rear screen or the high-resolution electronic viewfinder. And this is great when shooting on sunny days, or if you want to mimic the posture of holding a conventional DSLR like so. Now, when shooting through the viewfinder, you'll want to first fine-tune the diopter to your eye so that all the numbers that appear are in focus. So simply pull out this diopter knob, and while you're looking through the EVF, make sure that all the numbers are in focus. So you're going to turn it until all the numbers are completely in focus. Push it in. That's it. Alright, big tip and one of the big secrets inside every Nikon camera. What if I told you you have a quick reference guide built right into the camera? It's true. So all you got to do is in your menus, if you see a question mark right here in the bottom left hand corner of the display, tap it and you'll get a helpful explanation of what that menu item does. You can also press this question mark here on the bottom right hand corner to close it or bring it up again. Now, knowing this simple tip will make your life a lot easier when navigating through the menus. Now with that said, let's make sure your camera is optimized to your personal preferences. And make sure you take the time to do this. You only have to do it once because you want to make sure that your camera conforms to your shooting style and not the other way around. And by the way, if you have your camera in front of you, I highly recommend you do this with me right now. I'm going to go into the setup menu. It's the wrench right here. And the first option at the top of the menu is format memory card. It's very common for people to shoot on a card, copy all the images to your computer, and then leave their photos on their card. So we purposely make this setting available in an easy location so that you can get to it quickly. Now make absolutely certain that you want to do this first because everything that's on the card will be deleted and it's not recoverable. So I'm going to format my memory card right now. It asks me what slot. Confirm. Now it gives you a little bit of a sanity check here, making sure that you really want to do this before we wipe the card clean. I'm pressing the OK button right here. It's complete. Now, we're going to skip these save user settings for now. Come back to that later. Language and time zone and date we've already done, so we're going to go down here to monitor brightness. And you have a range of levels to choose from here. You can go anywhere from -5 to +5, and then this adjusts the brightness of the monitor. If you're working outside in very bright conditions, you want to put it on +5. If you're working in dimmer conditions like taking astrophotography, you might want to dim it to maybe -5. Touch that right there. Underneath that you have monitor color balance. This just affects the monitor. This means that if you're having a workflow with your computer, for example, and you want the monitors to generally match, you can tweak the color balance of your monitor here to your liking. Just know that this does not affect the actual files themselves. It just is the perception of what you see on the screen. Now we have similar controls here for viewfinder brightness, which is right now set to auto, but you can also manually set as well. And as well, you can also adjust the viewfinder color balance specifically just for the viewfinder, so that's independent of the monitor. Alright, this next option is the control panel brightness. You see right here at the back of the screen, and you can use this to automatically adjust how bright this control panel is. So right now it's reading the ambient light around the camera and it'll adjust the brightness. You can manually set it so it can be as bright or as dim as you want, or you can turn it off altogether. This might come in handy if you're doing astrophotography and you don't want any light leak whatsoever. Now, the next option we're going to show here is limit monitor mode selection. What this does is it applies to the viewfinder in the screen. So it applies to this button over here, the display button on the side of the viewfinder. And I'll just show you what this button does is it toggles through your various modes. So if I have all of them selected, you can see this is monitor only. This is something called prioritize viewfinder so that the display doesn't come up only in the viewfinder. You have something called automatic switch, so if your eye goes to the viewfinder, it deactivates the LCD or it brings it back up if you take your eye away. And then we have another mode called viewfinder only. Alright, the next option is information display. You see that right there on the setup menu. And what I'm going to show you here is the two options that it has. For me to explain this, I have to show you what it applies to. So see when you're shooting with the camera here, this screen can come up, but there's this screen right here which is your info screen. It doesn't show you live view, but it shows you all your main settings. You can change that to be light on dark if you're working in dark situations so it's not too bright. Now, next options here, we're going to skip right now because they're a little bit more advanced. If you want more information on them, find them in the user manual. I'm going to skip right down to save focus position. And when you get the camera, by default that's turned off. What this does is that if you turn it on, the lens will remember the last focus position before you even turn the camera off. By default, if you turn the camera off, the lens will reset to the focus position of infinity. If you wanted to remember that position, if you're if you're a videographer, or if you're putting the camera on a tripod and you need to remember that focus position, make that feature go on and it'll stay at that point even when you turn the camera on and off. Now the last option I'll show you here, clean image sensor. Now anytime you change lenses, you risk dust finding its way into the camera's sensor. What clean image sensor does, it'll actually shake the sensor, very, very fine shake, and that will hopefully remove dust from the sensor. You can actually activate that anytime you want. Like right now, if I press the OK button, it'll shake the sensor and hopefully shake the dust off. You can also program it to clean every time you turn the camera off. So every time you turn the camera off, sensor shakes, hopefully cleans it of any dust that might be on there. All right, now if you want to insert comments or copyright into what we call the metadata of files, you can do this with an option here called image comment or copyright information. I'll just go into there to show you what you can do. For example, if I wanted to put in information that I was shooting a wedding, all my photos will be tagged with that. You can use the touch screen here to adjust that, and then you just have to attach the comment when you want by pressing that and confirming it with OK. You'll see there it says on for image comment. You can do the same thing with copyright information. It just gives you a few more fields that you can use. Now, I'll go to the next option. This is pretty cool. It's called voice memo options, and this was a new feature for the Z6 II, Z7 II, and what this allows you to do is give yourself audio annotation. So say for example, I'm taking a picture and I want to remember who that person was. I can hold down this movie record button here and it will record a WAV file that's the same file name as that picture that I just took. So when you're searching for it in your computer, you'll find it and you can give yourself audio annotation and description of that picture if you want. Now the option under that are the beep options. This is just audible feedback from the camera that you can customize to a certain volume or a certain pitch, depending on how loud you want it to be. And that'll apply when you're doing things like auto-focusing and it achieves focus and you want to hear an audible beep just for some feedback. We'll talk about how to connect this to a smart device later, but you can do that with our free SnapBridge app. You can connect it to a PC directly as well using the Wi-Fi feature of the camera. And I'm going to explore this option here for battery info. So the battery is pretty cool because it can show you just exactly how much charge you have down to the percentage point, how many shots you've taken on a charge, and how old the battery is. You have a life indicator there. It's anywhere from 0 to 4. If it's 0, it's brand new. If it goes all the way up to 4, it's no longer holding a charge. So it's time to get a new battery. Next, we're going to show you something that's really important with these new cameras, USB power delivery. So I showed you that this has a USB terminal at the side of the camera right there. And when you have USB power delivery turned on, what this means is that if you're using a USB-C cable, that's USB-C on both ends, it'll reduce the drain on the battery and keep it running all day. In fact, indefinitely. So if you're working in a studio, indoors, or near a power supply, and you're shooting for hours, this feature can make a huge difference because it's essentially allowing you to shoot indefinitely, especially useful for live streamers or people using this as a webcam or something like that. Now, just to note, the battery won't charge when the camera is turned on, so if you want to charge the battery while it's in the camera, make sure you turn the camera off and you can charge it through the USB terminal. Now, the last feature I'm going to show you is this one called Save Load Menu Settings, and what this does is it allows you to save all your settings in the camera to your memory card so that if, for example, in the future you reset the camera, you can load all your favorite settings back into the camera and start from that point. Now, if you want some more customization on the camera, the first place to start is with a new feature called the I button, and it's also seen on the touch screen. I'll show you where that is right now on the camera. I turn it on right now. You see you have, I'll show you the I button right here, or this I button right here on the touch screen. It does the same thing. It brings up this row of 12 of your favorite options. Now, these are kind of the most common ones that you can quickly access on the touch screen, but you can customize this with settings that you might find more appropriate. And the way we're going to do this is we're going to hit the menu button right here, and if we're working in stills, for example, we're going to go to section F under controls, and you'll see the first option is customize iMenu. And if we go into customize iMenu, say for example, I'm not going to be using the Wi-Fi icon a whole lot, so I might just take that option out there and swap it out for something else. There's a whole list of things you can do here, as you can see. I'm just going to put it on something like group flash options. There you go. And next time that I bring up that menu and I press the I menu, you'll have the group flash options, and you can customize any one of those 12 positions. All right, now if you want more customizations to the camera, I'm going to direct you to F2 for photos or G2 for video in the custom setting menu, and that's where you can be assigned what physical buttons do on the camera. So check this out. If I go right in here into the custom settings menu and under controls, that's section F, F2 custom controls. Now, depending on what lens you have attached to your camera, you might have a variety of different options and buttons to assign on the lens itself or on the camera itself, as you can see there. Now, really think about what buttons you aren't using as you get to know the camera, and you can reprogram them to have different functions to make shooting easier. This is great for making your camera more intuitive to fit the way you shoot. Each button and control has different possible options, so you can really map this out so that you get the most out of the camera. Alright, now let's just talk about the OK button real quick here. It's located right in the middle of the multi-selector. There's two ways to get to this, for stills and for video. You'll see it's the third option there under controls. I'll also show you here under movie in section G. G3 can customize the way this OK button works. Typically, it centers the focus point right to the middle. If it's off to the right or left, quick way to just grab your center focus point. You can also have it zoom in or out of your movie or your image to various magnification levels, or in the case of video, you can have it start and stop your movie rather than the red record button at the top of the camera. Just might be easier to access with it in that position. Now, one last thing I'm going to show you here on the interface is the My Menu tab, and what you do here is you can add some of your favorite options that you commonly access. So for example, if I'm in movie and I want to pick movie size, I can add that to the menu and it's up there really quick, and you can add several items to that menu for quick access. Okay, now let's talk about actually taking photos. Now, we're going to make sure that the switch at the top here is in fact on the photo position. There's two positions right there for video and for stills. Make sure it's not on video, otherwise you won't be taking high definition stills. And I'm going to direct you now to a very important setting. That's a focus mode. You can access that either through the I menu right here, or you can toggle it by pressing this FN2 button. It's a little shortcut there I'm going to show you as a Easter egg, and if you press that down and rotate this back dial, you can toggle through your focus modes. Now, what are these focus modes and what do they do? The first one is called single AF. This is single autofocus, and you use this when you're shooting static objects or things that aren't moving. Basically, the way this works is when you half depress the shutter, and I'm going to show you right now with this flower right here. When you half depress the shutter, as you can see, it's going to focus, but if that subject moves away, it's out of focus right now, I'm going to have to half press again on the shutter release and reacquire focus. So, for example, if that came closer to me and it's now out of focus, I have to half press and reacquire again. You see the green, you hear it beep, it's confirmed in focus, you press all the way, take the picture. Now, if your subject is continuously moving, AFS is going to give you a lot of out of focus images. So that's why I suggest changing that now to AFC, and that stands for continuous autofocus or continuous AF. Again, you can do it that way, or you can press down the function 2 button at the front of the camera right there, rotate the main command dial, and you can access AFC. So the difference is, I'll show the same thing with the flower, if the subject changes proximity to you and the camera, it keeps it in focus. So all I'm doing is I'm half pressing on this the entire time, and it will keep in focus, and it will focus rather right up until you take the picture. If you let go of that, all right, and I bring it to the camera right now, you'll see that it's out of focus until I half press, and if I let go and I move it away, it's going to be out of focus. I got to keep pressing that down And as long as I'm pressing it down, it's going to keep that subject in focus right up until you take the photo. This is a great mode if you're shooting sports, for example, wildlife, or anything that's moving. If it's your kids running around in the backyard, you want to make sure you have it on AFC. And then the third option that you'll find on that focus mode is MF. That stands for manual focus. That'll completely deactivate the autofocus, so whether you're holding down the shutter release halfway, it will not initiate focus. This is great when you want to fine-tune things, and you would fine-tune it using, in this lens, is called the control ring. So you move that around, and that will adjust your manual focus. You even see an indicator right here showing you where you're focusing generally in the quote-unquote macro zone right there, which is the minimum focusing distance. On this lens, I can focus as close as a foot away, or to infinity, or anywhere in between. That just gives you a slight sort of guide. You can also deactivate the lens manual focus right there, but this will deactivate it through the menus. Either way, you'll have manual focus. If you have a dedicated lens that has a dedicated manual focus ring, you can adjust manual focus through that as well. Alright, so the next thing we're going to explore is how the camera adjusts for subjects within the frame. And we're going to start off with our focus mode set to AFS, but now we're going to access something different in the eye menu called AF area mode. And if you see here, we have several options, and we're going to start off with this one here called Auto Area AF. And for general snapshots, this is a good option to be in. The camera will generally look to focus on anything within this red border. And I'm just going to show you here on the interface. There's these red hash marks here around the sides. Anything that's within there, within that range, it'll focus on. You'll see those green dots light up when it's in focus. You'll even hear the beep, if you will. And there's an additional option in here that you can fine-tune it to detect faces. So check this out. Under Auto Area AF, there's now these new options here for Auto Area AF for people and animals. And if it can detect a face or even an eye, it will change the box to highlight that eye of a human subject or an animal such as a dog or cat. If you want, you can adjust that eye if it detects multiple eyes using the sub-selector or the multi-selector. Now I'm going to go to another option here called Wide Area AF. If you want to be more specific and restrict focusing to a certain portion of the screen, you can use one of several different modes. Now I'm going to start off with Wide Area AFL, and you can see here what that looks like. It's a red box in the middle of the frame. Now if I hit this I button again and I show you these options, you'll see that there's two other options with it, because it can also detect human faces or animals. So you can use it in conjunction with eye detect, both for people and for animals, but it'll only look for people and animals whenever it's in that red box. The beauty about this is you can move that red box around the frame. So if you want to restrict your focusing in that area, use the Wide Area AF. And that'll be great for just overall composing. Now I'm going to show you another option here called Wide Area AFS. And this, as well as single point, can be used if you want to be really precise about where you're focusing, but it doesn't have detection of faces or animals. So I'm just going to quickly show you here the difference in size between Wide Area AFS and Wide Area AFL. And you see how I quickly did that. I'm going to show you a quick shortcut here. Is I can adjust my focusing AF area modes by holding down this button at the front, just like I did with the focusing mode. I can adjust my area mode by rolling the front dial here. That is the sub-command dial, and holding that function 2 button at the same time for quick access or quick shifts for those focus modes. Now with Wide Area AFS or single point, you can see that small point right there. Both of these options will allow you to move that red box around the frame and only focus what is in those red boxes when you half press the shutter release. Alright, and lastly we have Pinpoint AF. Now this is very useful if you're doing very precise work, and let's just say with a macro lens and the depth of field is shallow. Pinpoint allows you to use the smallest portion of the frame, and this method uses a slower autofocusing method, but it's very, very precise. Again, you're going to find it over here under AF area mode, and it'll be Pinpoint, the first option right there. Remember, this is only available when you're using AFS, so you don't want to use it if your subject is moving. All right, speaking of moving subjects, let's flip our focus mode to AFC and see what AF area modes this has for us. So in AFC, you'll see that all the AF area modes that AFS had are there with the exception of pinpoint. However, we have a new option here called Dynamic Area AF. And with this mode, you acquire focus with that small box, and you can move it anywhere you want in the frame. And that small box is what you use to initiate your autofocus. But if the subject leaves that square, as long as it's within the radius of these dots, then the camera will keep your subject in focus. You can imagine using this mode if you expect your subject to be moving somewhat erratically, such as when you're shooting sports. Alright, now that you know the different ways you can get your camera to autofocus, now let's explore the different release modes of the camera. We'll start with single mode. You simply press this button here at the bottom right hand of the camera. It'll start with single frame, and this is the default option. As long as you're pressing the shutter release down, and it's the same for the Z6 II or the Z7 II, it'll take simply one shot. It doesn't matter how long you're holding it down for. If you switch this mode here to continuous L, you'll see you have the option of customizing it to 1, 2, or up to 5 frames per second. So I'm going to leave it at 3, and this is what 3 frames per second sounds like. Now, if you put it on continuous H, that stands for continuous high speed. This will automatically take frames at 5.5 shots per second. Watch this. All right, and right after that we have something called continuous H extended. Now, one of the differences between the Z6 II and the Z7 II, as I mentioned before, is the frame rates. This is where it comes into play. If you have a Z6 II, by picking continuous H extended, you'll shoot up to 14 frames per second in this mode. If you have the Z7 II, you'll shoot up to 10 frames per second. However, you won't see the screen black out in this mode. Alright, and the last option here is the self-timer delay. And the cool thing about this is it can set the camera to take a shot after either 2, 5, 10, or even 20 seconds of delay. The second option here is the number of shots you can take after the countdown. And I love this option because if someone accidentally blinks in the shot, you have multiple options to choose from, up to 9 shots after the self-timer delay fires. Alright, now let's talk about setting up your camera for video this time. First step is to flip this little toggle on the back of the camera to the video position. So you have your stills position there and you have your video position here. When you do this, your settings will automatically switch to the last settings you used for video. So if you're switching back and forth between stills and video and back again, the settings you last used in either mode will stick, so it's almost like having 2 independent cameras in one. Now, notice that the items in the I menu are now displaying video-centric features like video resolutions, as well as audio settings. So if I switch back to the stills mode, my menu reverts back to stills features. Let's go back to video mode. I also want you to notice in the I menu, there's a focus mode that is automatically set to AFF. And this is full-time autofocus, and it's exclusively available for video. So the way it works is it focuses continuously while you're recording your movies. You don't even have to press the shutter release, and it's designed to track moving subjects in a scene. In AFF mode, you have to press when you want to prevent the focus from changing. Otherwise, it constantly keeps on tracking. Now, for those of you who want to manual focus, just select the MF option and make your focus adjustments directly on the lens focusing ring. Alright, now let me walk you through some of the video settings that you want to make yourself familiar with within the movie shooting menu. And we're going to start off here with destination, and this is where your movies are going to be recorded to in the memory cards. Now you can choose between either the CF Express card slot or the SD card slot. In this case, I'm going to choose the CF Express or XVD card slot because it has the most space in it. And I recommend that if you want to maximize the performance of the camera, you definitely want to get a high-performance CF Express card, especially when shooting for video. Alright, the next one is choose image area. And you have your options here between FX or a crop mode called DX. So if you select DX, you're using a smaller portion of the image sensor. And what that means is that your focal length will effectively be 1.5 times longer or more narrow. So in the case of a 50mm lens, for example, it'll really be the equivalent of viewing through a 75mm lens if you have it in DX mode. So just be aware of that. It's really handy if you want to get closer and not have to physically move the camera or shift the lens. Alright, the next option down on the menu is frame size and frame rate. Now on the Z6 II, you can shoot anywhere from 4K 60, so that's 4K resolution, 3840 by 2160 at 60p, and all the way down to full HD resolutions at 1920 by 1080. And if you look down here, we have options for in-camera slow motion. So what this does is it shoots it at 120 frames per second, but plays it back at either 24 or 30 frames per second, and it gives you a slow motion effect. Now, if you're just getting familiar with video frame rates, the higher the frame rate, the more leverage you have to slow down the footage for more dramatic effect. If you go out of that, the next option down is a movie file type. You can choose between MOV or MP4. MOV tends to give you higher quality, but MP4 is more universally compatible and recognized for streaming and uploading services. Alright, the next one down is ISO sensitivity, and in this menu you're adjusting for video only. Here you can set the limit to your ISO maximum sensitivity, which you might want to do if you're shooting in auto ISO to avoid going beyond a threshold or range that you feel might start to degrade your image quality. Now, auto ISO can also be turned on or off in this menu setting. That applies only when you're using it in manual mode. Underneath that, we have white balance, and this is what allows you to give you some presets as to how it treats white balance depending on the color temperature that you want to set or balance for. What's cool about this is you have other fine-tuning features here, such as choosing your color temperature and dialing an actual number in, setting your tint, or even doing a preset manual where you'll white balance off of a white board or some kind of reference to set your white balance manually. Under that is picture controls. Now this is really cool because you get to burn a certain contrast, saturation look right into the video image. If you plan on color grading your videos in post, I suggest using flat profile. Otherwise, feel free to experiment with a number of other creative options. Now we also have image stabilization options, also known as VR or vibration reduction right here. You can have this option set to mimic what you have in photo settings. Again, this is really giving you a more stable stills, or in this case a video image, and it can compensate for your handshake about 5 stops of VR. Now the option right underneath it, electronic VR, can be extremely useful, but it will crop a little bit of what the sensor sees to achieve the EVR, meaning that you're not using the full FX sensor and your field of view might be slightly cropped in just a touch. The next option here is microphone sensitivity, and if you're perfectly comfortable letting the camera choose your setting, I suggest just leaving it on auto. However, if you want to manually set that, you have one of 20 options to choose from, and you have a guide there that's gonna effectively tell you when you're starting to clip once you see it getting into the yellow. So you can customize that as you see fit, or you can turn the camera's microphone off altogether so it's just recording moving picture with video. Now there's another option under that that still applies to audio called the attenuator. And the audio attenuator will prevent the built-in microphone from peaking if it picks up a loud sound. So when you turn it on, it'll reduce the microphone gain and prevent distortion when recording in loud environments. All right, now there's another place I want to show you for video settings that's in the custom settings menu, and it's in this little pencil tab over here. It has its own section, G for movie. And here are a few options that I want to go over, and we'll start off with AF speed and tracking sensitivity. Let's start off with AF speed. Essentially, you're going to adjust AF speed to control how fast or how slow you want the focus to progressively change from one subject to another. Perhaps you want an abrupt change to focus in order to surprise your viewer, or you want a very slow focus pull for a dramatic effect, or maybe you just want to fine-tune it to your liking. You can do that by making it either faster or slower right here in this menu. Now, as for AF tracking sensitivity, this is where you get to define whether or not you want the focus to change from one subject to another. So just imagine, for example, you're shooting a soccer game and you're only interested in tracking one player, and that's where you want to maintain your focus. If you set your tracking sensitivity to low, if a player briefly obstructs you and your intended target, the camera won't focus on that new player. Whereas if you set it to high, the camera will react much more quickly and it'll have a tendency to grab on whatever's right in front of the camera. So play around with this and fine-tune it depending on how quickly you want the camera to react to subjects in front of the lens. Okay, so let's talk about highlight display. This is commonly referred to as zebra stripes. And you use this to monitor areas of overexposure in your frame. So when something's overexposed, usually a bright highlight or sky, you can adjust your exposure settings before shooting to avoid losing detail in your video that can't be recovered in post. So I highly recommend getting familiar with this feature. Now, if you find yourself using the same combination of settings over and over again, you might want to assign them to the U1, U2, or U3 positions on the top dial here. These are your custom user settings and can include photo shooting menu options, movie shooting menu options, custom settings, a shooting mode, or any combination of all these things. Now think about photographing birds or wildlife and you're going back and forth between your settings, maybe even switching lenses, or you might be shooting portraiture and you might have certain settings for one type of shot where you're shooting in ambient light and settings for another type of shot where you're always shooting under flash. Using the custom settings mode really helps in these situations, and it's really simple to program. One of the most overlooked features of this camera that I'm going to show you how to use right now. Simply put, whatever your settings you have in the camera right now, such as I have this set to manual mode, I have a certain shutter speed, aperture, and ISO set, all those settings that I have there, I'm going to do a snapshot of what the camera is set to right now and program it to one of those three positions. All I have to do is go into the setup menu and find save user settings, and now it's up to me to assign it to the position that I want. In this case, I'm just going to select save to U1. I hit save settings, and that's it. Now whenever I rotate the dial to that particular U1 position, the camera will recall those settings, and it'll always be there even after you turn the camera off until you reprogram that position. Alright, now that we know our way around the camera, let's get the camera paired with a smart device. So that we can share images and use our phone or tablet as a remote control for capturing photos and videos. SnapBridge is Nikon's free app for connecting the Z6 II or Z7 II to an iOS or Android device. Now you can pair over Bluetooth or over Wi-Fi. But for simplicity, let's take the Bluetooth route, which will provide constant connectivity between the camera and the smart device. I'm going to start. I'm going to go into the setup menu in the camera and I'm going to choose connect to smart device. Now under pairing Bluetooth, we're going to choose Start Pairing. Now on the SnapBridge app, I'm just going to hit here, Connect to Camera. And in here, I'm going to tap on the Z62. That's the serial number that I'm working with here, so I'm just going to tap on that. SnapBridge is now searching for a Bluetooth signal for my camera. And there it is. I'm going to tap on the phone. Pair. Alright, now we've just established a connection allowing me to start transferring web-ready 2-megapixel JPEG images and start using my phone as a Bluetooth remote control. Now if I wanted to download full-resolution JPEGs, NEF files, or movie files, I would connect via the Wi-Fi option. Now with the Bluetooth connection, you should be aware of the fact that the default setting is to send every image from my camera directly to the phone. So I prefer to make my own selections so as not to bog down the phone with a ton of images. So I'm going to go back to the camera's setup menu and select Connect to Smart Device. And then choose Select to Send. And then Auto Select to Send. And turn that off. Now that it's off, only the pictures I tag to send to my phone will get sent. Now how do I do that? After taking some pictures, I just press the play button and find an image that I want to send. And one at a time, I press the I button and tap Select to Send to Smart Device. And so there you have it. The Z6 II and Z7 II are two high-performance cameras packed with features and full of possibilities. And knowing your way around the camera is the first step to having complete control over your photos and video productions. So I hope this primer course on getting the most out of your Z6 II and Z7 II have given you a stronger working knowledge of your camera to get you started. And for more tips and insights from Nikon, check out all our educational content on our website.